They called me into the boardroom at 9:30 sharp. The message came at 8:22 that morning. A short email, 3 lines, marked urgent. Subject: Performance Review 9:30 a.m., Conference Room 14B. I didn't think twice. Why would I? I had just finished the Covington deal, one of the biggest accounts in the firm's history. I'd spent 3 months negotiating that contract, 3 months of sleepless nights, cold coffee, and endless calls with a client who didn't trust anyone until I walked into his office. That account alone was worth nearly $30 million in retained assets. Everyone said it was impossible. I made it happen. So yeah, I thought it was good news. The elevator ride to the 14th floor was smooth and silent. Chicago lights spilled through the glass walls, bouncing off steel and marble. I watched my reflection in the mirror of the elevator door, hair pulled back, blazer pressed, a confident woman who had earned her place in a world full of sharks. Westbridge Consulting wasn't an easy place to survive. You had to be smart, fast, and always 2 steps ahead of the politics. I had spent 4 years there, climbing my way up without any family name, without an Ivy League pedigree, just results. That was my only weapon. Results and discipline. The elevator doors opened to the executive floor. Usually I loved this hallway, the view of Lake Michigan on one side, the sleek design, the smell of expensive coffee drifting from the break area. But that morning, something felt off. The air was too still. Conversations stopped as I walked by. Greg from operations looked away too quickly. Jenna from HR gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I ignored it. People always act weird before performance reviews. They project their own anxiety. When I reached the conference room, the glass walls framed the city like a painting. Chicago at its proudest, bright, sharp, and unapologetic. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. 3 people were waiting inside. Elliot Vaughn, our CEO, Margaret Lee from HR, and a man I didn't know, suit, calm face, legal pad on the table. No one was smiling. I hesitated for half a second, then pulled out the chair at the end of the table. "Morning," I said. My voice was steady. "Frankie," Elliot began, his tone too formal, too careful. "Please have a seat." The air felt heavy. There was no presentation on the screen, no numbers, no documents celebrating achievements. Just one plain manila folder resting in front of him. I sat but didn't lean back. "Is everything all right?" Elliot exchanged a quick glance with the man from legal. That was my first real warning. "Frankie," he said again, "this isn't an easy conversation. The firm has been restructuring. We're consolidating departments, merging client portfolios, and as a result, certain roles are being eliminated." The words slid across the table like cold metal. "Eliminated?" I repeated. "Which roles?" Margaret's hands were folded neatly on the table. "Yours," she said quietly. For a moment, everything went still. I looked at Elliot, waiting for him to correct her, to explain this was a misunderstanding. But he didn't. He looked at me the way people look at something they've already decided to destroy. "You're serious?" "I'm afraid so," he said. "It's purely structural, nothing to do with performance." I let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "Structural? I manage 5 of your top clients, Elliot. I just brought in Covington. That contract alone paid for this office view." "I know," he said softly. "This decision wasn't personal." Of course it wasn't personal. It never is, until it is. The man from legal cleared his throat. "We're offering a standard severance package," he said, sliding the folder toward me. 2 weeks of pay, continued health coverage through the end of the month, and a non-disclosure agreement. The folder stopped just short of my fingertips. The words termination of employment stared back at me in bold black type. I didn't touch it. "Who's taking over my accounts?" I asked. The pause that followed was louder than any answer. Elliot's jaw tightened. "Clara Vaughn will be assuming your portfolio." I laughed again, this time low and slow. "Clara, your daughter. She's proven herself to be a quick learner," he said, almost defensively. "She doesn't know the difference between a hedge fund and a holding company," I said. "You're giving her clients who trust me with their life savings. You're risking millions for nepotism." Margaret shifted in her chair. "Frankie, let's keep this professional." "Oh, I'm being professional," I said, standing. "I'm just surprised you're not embarrassed." The legal man reached for his pen, pretending to be invisible. Elliot avoided my eyes. "I need you to return your company laptop and phone," Margaret said. "Security will escort you to your desk." I didn't move. "You deactivated my access already, didn't you?" Elliot hesitated again. That was all the answer I needed. "You did it before you even told me." I shook my head slowly. "You erased me before I walked into this room." No one spoke. I picked up the folder and turned it over in my hands. "No non-compete agreement?" "It's included in the severance," the lawyer said quickly. "Then I'm declining the severance." His pen stopped moving. "Excuse me, I'm not signing anything." I slid the folder back toward him. "If you want me gone, I'll go, but I don't need your hush money." Elliot's face tightened. "Let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be." "It already is," I said. For a long moment, none of us moved. The only sound was the distant hum of traffic from the streets below. Then I pushed back the chair and stood tall. "Elliot," I said, meeting his eyes, "you just fired the wrong person. Remember this moment when it comes back to you." And with that, I left. As I walked down the hallway, people stared but didn't speak. Their silence felt heavier than pity. At the end of the corridor, 2 security guards waited by the elevator. The older one, Mike, had been greeting me every morning for years. He couldn't meet my eyes. When the elevator doors closed, my reflection stared back at me. For the first time in years, I didn't see the company's logo behind me, just myself. And that, strangely, felt like freedom waiting to happen. The elevator slid open on my floor. 2 guards followed a polite distance behind me. There was no need to touch my arm. I was not going to make a scene. I never needed volume to make a point. The office smelled like burnt coffee and fresh paper. The carpet softened footsteps to a hush. I passed the row of framed awards, names etched in metal, faces frozen in happy compliance. Someone had placed a vase of lilies by reception. Their sweetness felt wrong in the air, like perfume at a hospital. At my desk, I stopped. Someone was sitting in my chair. Clara. She turned when she felt my shadow. Her hair was perfect, her blouse new. My password had already been changed, but my name still lingered on a sticky note taped to the monitor. The bright yellow looked like a bruise. Clara stood so quickly her chair knocked into the credenza. She said, "I am so sorry, Frankie. This is horrible." She had a folder open. It was labeled Portfolio Transition Plan. My plan. A dozen color tabs peeked out like little flags planted on stolen ground. I looked at the document and then at her face. She kept blinking, the way people do when they hope you will absolve them. I pointed at the chair. "You are welcome to sit there," I said, "once you understand why they stayed with me." Her lips parted. She had nothing to say to that. I opened the top drawer of my desk and lifted a small ceramic cactus. It was a gift from a client whose wife collected succulents. The memory warmed me for a second, then cooled again. Next came the mug from a women in finance conference, the one that promised a better future in bold serif font. I set it carefully in the box. People were pretending not to look. I could feel their silence press against my back like a wall. The kind of silence that says we are sorry, but we are also grateful it is not us. I reached for a simple black notebook. This was the one that mattered, not company property, not a spreadsheet, not a slide deck. Just my handwriting, my shorthand, my tiny coded stars that meant "do not cancel this lunch," or "remember his kid made the varsity team," or "she prefers small talk after the numbers, not before." Every page carried the echo of a conversation where trust had formed in the space between a question and the quiet that followed. Clara cleared her throat. "I know this is delicate," she said, "and I know you have a special touch with clients. I would really appreciate a transition meeting, maybe 2 hours, to go over your methods and notes." I looked up at her and smiled. It was not unkind. "My consulting rate is $500 an hour, 3-hour minimum." Her face fell. "But you are being let go." "Exactly," I said, "which means anything you want now, you ask me on my terms." Behind her on the whiteboard, someone had copied the outline of my quarterly strategy. It was not the full thing. It was missing the intuition that turns a plan into action. Still, it was mine. I picked up the eraser and moved slowly over the lines. The ink vanished. Clara made a small sound. "You cannot do that," she said. "I can clean a whiteboard," I said. "My thoughts are not company property." The older security guard had come closer without intruding. He had kind eyes. He had memorized the names of everyone on our floor. "I am sorry, Ms. McBride," he said softly. "Nothing to be sorry for," I answered. Jenna from HR appeared with a clipboard and an apologetic smile. She handed me a form for my final expense approvals. I flipped through it. Dinners, flights, conferences. Then something caught my eye. A client dinner I hosted with Thomas Gray was listed as a party of 5. I remembered that night. It had been just the 2 of us at a quiet table near the window. I said, "This line is wrong. You billed the client for an extra 3 guests. Jenna flushed. "I will check that." "Please do," I said. "I would hate to see an audit hurt this department." Her mouth tightened. She nodded, turned, and left. At the edge of my vision, heads lifted above cubicle walls. People forget that courage is contagious, even in small doses. I placed my photo from the retreat at the bottom of the box. 4 colleagues smiled with me on a rooftop. I remembered what the wind felt like that evening and the way the city lights made everything look possible. I let the picture go. It was just paper. The possibility had been mine all along. Clara was still standing. She had not put the folder down. "There is a cake in the break room," she offered. "They wanted to surprise me. I did not know they would do this today." I met her eyes. "It must be nice to be surprised in your favor," I said. She swallowed. "I do not want enemies here, Frankie." "Then be good at your job," I said. It is amazing how often that solves problems. I lifted the box and nodded at the guards. We walked toward the elevators. The sound of my heels on the carpeted hall felt like a metronome. At the glass wall by the conference rooms, the city was spread out in layers of steel and light. I stopped for a breath. Elliot was at the far end of the corridor, speaking urgently into his phone. He saw me and turned away. Not even a nod, not even goodbye. The elevator arrived. Inside, the walls reflected 3 versions of me. The woman I had been when I started, the woman they had tried to erase, the woman who was about to step into her own name. I thought of the first day I walked into this building, the weight of hope in my chest. I thought of every night I stayed late because I believed effort would be seen and respected. The doors opened in the lobby. The marble floor gleamed like water. The company logo loomed on the far wall, stainless steel letters set with absurd confidence. I set the box on a bench and took out my phone. The messages were already stacking up. Clients, friends, a reporter I did not know. The phone vibrated and vibrated until it felt like a small pulse in my palm. I looked up at the logo once more. I whispered, "Thank you for the lesson." I walked outside. The air had changed. It carried the river smell and the promise of rain. A cab honked and a cyclist cut past with a curse that made 2 tourists laugh. Street life does not care about corporate drama. It moves forward, it breathes, it keeps score in a different currency. On the corner, a woman sold coffee from a silver cart. I bought one and stood under a tree while the first thin drops fell through the leaves. I tasted the coffee and it was strong and bitter and perfect. I imagined the boardroom again, the folder, the way Elliot could not hold my gaze. I pictured Clara sitting very straight in my chair and trying to memorize the language of trust from a bulleted list. I pictured our clients noticing the subtle change in tone, the missing pause after a hard question, the way empathy cannot be faked for long. A text came in from a number I knew by heart. It was 3 words. "Call me now." I smiled to myself. The storm had not even started, and already the sky was lighting up. I put the box in the trunk of a cab and slid into the back seat. "Home," I told the driver. Then I added, "and thank you." He shrugged in the mirror. "You look like someone who just quit something that needed quitting," he said. "Close enough," I answered. He drove east toward the river. The city blurred on the window, lights smearing into soft lines by the rain. I rested my forehead on the cool glass and let my breath steady. The fear was there, of course it was, but something else had arrived with it. It felt like air after a long dive. It felt like truth. By the time we reached my building, the rain had cleared. The sky held that washed blue that comes only after a storm has made its point. I paid the driver, carried the box upstairs, and set it on my kitchen table. The apartment was quiet. I listened to the silence like it was a friend. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed against the dim room. My reflection floated over the desktop for a moment, then vanished as the first folder opened. This is where the real story begins, I thought. I took a deep breath and whispered, "Let us see what you forgot to take from me." I clicked. I sat with the laptop open, the room silent except for the hum of the fan and the slow tick of the wall clock. The desktop looked like a shoreline after a tide has pulled back. There were the tidy folders I had curated over years of careful habits. There were the small lists named for airports and clients and hotels that knew how to keep secrets. There was a folder called Phoenix. I clicked it open. Inside were subfolders labeled with names and seasons. Clients were never just accounts to me. They were stories with movement. Spring, when someone finally said yes. Summer, when returns felt effortless and optimism rose on its own. Autumn, when fear crept in and people needed truth more than sugar. Winter, when you visit with coffee and listen for as long as it takes. I organized them that way to remind myself that money follows emotion and that emotion follows weather. I opened spring. I found Thomas Gray, notes scrolled in clean lines. Black coffee only, no milk, no sugar. Morning calls between 5:30 and 7. Do not schedule on April 2nd. Never use slides. Bring a pad and a fountain pen. He tests sincerity with silence. Respect it. I remembered the first meeting we had after his daughter's accident. He stared out the window at the river and said he hated the sound of elevators. I said nothing. He glanced at me and nodded like I had passed an exam. Because most people rush to fill pain with talk, he needed me to do the opposite. I closed Thomas and opened Evelyn Brooke. Evelyn was a puzzle with elegant edges, gluten intolerant, shellfish allergy. Shoes that cost more than my first apartment. A brain that moved like chess but a heart that liked to be surprised. Never offer a discount. Offer precision. When she runs, she answers calls only between mile 12 and mile 15. She once said that cadence clears static. I believed her. I opened Marcus next. Night owl. Loves basketball. Texts between 10 and midnight during West Coast games. Tests your patience with faux dumb questions. Answer once, then stay quiet. He respects restraint. His mother collects hand-painted teacups. He will never sell them. Do not joke about heirlooms. I skimmed Lucian and Adela Clark, two founders who thrived on conflict. They like to have the same meeting in 2 rooms and compare what you said. Make every thread visible to both. When they fight, end the meeting and send a single-page summary. Do not mediate. Let structure do the calming. I moved from name to name, and each one brought back a moment, a tone, a scent in a room. None of it would survive a transfer into a fresh inbox and a smile that had not earned the right to suggest anything. Trust does not move when you drag a folder from one screen to another. It walks on its own feet to the person who built the bridge. My phone buzzed on the table and then again. I let the messages pile up while I took stock of what I had and what I wanted. I did not want to burn Westbridge for sport. I wanted to build something that could breathe without permission. I took a yellow pad and wrote a single column. What I know. Then a second, what they think I know. In the first, I wrote 5 names. In the second, I wrote the word nothing. I called Daniel. He picked up on the second ring. I could hear traffic and a siren somewhere on his end. He sounded awake in the way lawyers do when there is an opportunity in the air. You finally did it, he said. They finally did it to me, I answered. He laughed. Same result. What do you need? An LLC today. Bank account by afternoon. Contract templates with clean exit clauses. And I want to review my old employment agreement. You remember the clause we added, he said. Relationships that predate employment remain personal property of the employee. I smiled even though he could not see me. I remember. Good. Send me 3 potential names. I looked at the pad on the table. The word Phoenix stared back, but I set it aside for now. McBride Strategy Group, I said. Strong, he replied. Send me your address. I will start filing in 1 hour. You still want the operating agreement that gives you total control for the first year? Yes, I will consider partners when trust is a ledger entry instead of a promise. He whistled softly. You sound like the version of you that scares people. I will call you in an hour. He hung up. I exhaled. The quiet felt less like emptiness and more like a runway. I opened my email and drafted a short note to myself. Subject line said Day 1. I wrote a single paragraph. You are not leaving a company. You are returning to your name. I saved it and closed the window. No point sending inspiration to myself. The work would do that. I picked up the phone and started with Thomas. He answered on the first ring like he always does. I heard, he said without greeting. Tell me you are not going anywhere I cannot follow. I am not, I said. They ended my role this morning. I am starting my own firm. If you want to continue with me, I will have paperwork to you by afternoon. If you prefer to stay put, I will respect it without argument. Silence filled the line, not hostile. Assessing. Where are you, he asked. Home. Café Fox in 30 minutes, he said. Let us look each other in the eye and put this to paper. I smiled. I will bring a fountain pen. He chuckled, a rare sound. Black coffee, no sugar, always. We hung up. I added a calendar entry that belonged to no corporate system, and it felt like oxygen. Next was Evelyn. She picked up breathless the sound of sneakers on pavement. Say it quickly, she said. I am at mile 11. I left Westbridge this morning, I said. I am independent now. She did not slow her pace. Good. Send me a rate sheet that pays you and hurts nobody. I want the person, not the logo. You have 1 hour before I hit mile 15. I will make it 45 minutes. She laughed once. Precision. That is why I call you. Be smart about liability. I will expect a transition plan that once again makes their people look careless. Do it kindly. I will. She clicked off like a pistol starting a race. I called Marcus. He did not answer. I sent a text that said call when the Lakers start. He replied instantly. I knew it. I give you 72 hours before you on the city. Do not prove me wrong. Send the contract at 10:30 tonight and make the cover sheet funny. I grinned. He always looked for the joke as proof that you were not desperate. I sent quick notes to Lucian and Adela with a single line. If either of you would like continuity without theater, I am available. 30 seconds later both replied. We prefer shared disclosures. Thursday. 4 Seasons. 2:30. Bring 1 page only. The clock read 9:06. I still had time before Thomas. I opened a new document and wrote a clean engagement letter with my new company name on top. The words McBride Strategy Group looked right and heavy in mine. The rate line felt honest. I would not undercut Westbridge to buy affection. I would price the work at what it cost me to care and to do it well. I set the template aside and opened a different file, Notes for Launch. It started with a list of ethical rules. No stolen data. No backdoor logins. No pressure. Only offers. Only clarity. Only the truth that people already feel but need to hear aloud. I added one more rule: win in the daylight. The phone vibrated again, a number I did not know this time. Is this Ms. McBride? The voice asked. Yes, I said. This is Alicia from the Tribune. I was told by a source that several large clients might be leaving Westbridge today. Would you like to comment? I kept my voice even. I do not comment on rumors. I serve clients. If they make decisions, they make them for reasons that belong to them. Is it true you were terminated in a performance meeting? I ended employment this morning. I will not discuss their internal process. When I have something to announce, you will receive a press release. She paused just long enough to let me know she respected the line. Understood. Off the record, I like the way you phrase things. Good luck, Ms. McBride. Thank you, I said. I closed my eyes for a moment and pictured the boardroom again. Thin envelope, careful voices. I opened my eyes and pictured something else. A small sign on a glass door with my name, a room with sunlight, a table where nobody whispers, a wall where we hang one frame that says your trust is our profit. I glanced at the Phoenix folder. A smaller folder sat inside it with a name I did not touch. I let it sit there like a book you only open when the timing matters. Not yet, I said to the empty room. Patience is part of the thrill. I printed 3 copies of the new engagement letter and slid them into a leather folder. I put on a black jacket that made me feel like I could walk through smoke and come out clean. I checked the mirror. My face looked steady. My eyes looked alive. I stepped into the hallway and locked the door behind me. It clicked with a sound I wanted to remember. It sounded like a beginning that had chosen me. On the street, the city had returned to its usual rhythm. Cyclists threaded past cabs. A dog tugged a man toward a bakery. 2 teenagers argued about a pop song as if it could change the laws of physics. The ordinary had never looked so much like a crown. By the time I reached Café Fox, Thomas was already at a corner table. He had a small notebook and a black pen aligned with the edge of his saucer. He looked up, measured me, and then gave a single nod. You look taller, he said. I laughed. I feel lighter. Good. Sit. Show me what your future looks like on paper. I slid the folder across the table. He read silently. His eyes slowed at the liability clauses. He glanced up twice when the values page made its point without sounding like a sermon. He signed with a clean stroke, then put the pen down as if to punctuate a sentence only he could hear. He said they replaced a relationship with a title. You and I are not titles. No, I said, we are the work. I drank my coffee. He finished his. We shook hands without ceremony. It felt like stepping onto a bridge that would not bend under us. He stood and touched the back of the chair with his fingertips. You will get calls today, he said. Some will try to make you angry. Some will try to make you sentimental. Neither is your language. Keep speaking your own. I will. He left. I sat for a moment in the corner light as if I needed the sun to certify the moment. Then I gathered my things and walked out into the soft wind of late morning. Back home, I placed the signed letter in a new folder named Day 1. I added Evelyn's draft, Marcus's cover sheet, and a single page for the Clarks. I watched the directory populate like a time-lapse of a city being built in miniature. I felt that small click inside my chest that means the machine is awake. The phone rang again. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It was Elliot, voice strained and polite. We need to discuss a transition plan. The board is concerned. Please call me. I pressed delete. I opened my calendar and blocked the afternoon for 3 meetings that did not belong to Westbridge. The page looked clean and committed. Then I returned to the Phoenix folder. I hovered over the hidden piece that had sat there like a secret I carried beneath my ribs. I did not open it. It was enough to know it was real. It was enough to know that when the time came, it would carry its own weight. For now, I had everything I needed. A name, a pen, the truth. And people who could feel the difference when someone spoke it without apology. By the time afternoon stretched across the windows, the apartment was littered with papers. Some printed contracts, some notes written in half-phrases that only I could decode. The hum of the printer sounded like breath. The smell of ink and coffee blended into something that felt alive. Freedom doesn't come with trumpets. It comes with small noises, a paper sliding into a folder, a signature drying, a key turning in a lock that belongs to you. I looked at the folder labeled Day 1. The weight of it was ridiculous for something made of paper and hope. Inside were 3 signed agreements, 3 clients who had chosen me over the company. That was enough to start a storm. I took my phone and opened a new note. To do: 1. Register business email domain. 2. Set up temporary office. 3. Hire accountant. 4. Never ever forget this feeling. A soft knock broke the quiet. My neighbor, Mrs. Evans, stood at the door holding a box of donuts. She was 70, always in floral dresses, always knew when someone was in trouble. "You look like someone who forgot to eat," she said. I smiled. "You might be psychic." She came in and set the box on the counter. "Rough day? Transformational," I said. She laughed. "That sounds expensive." "It might be." She looked at the papers spread across the table. "Starting something?" "Yes, my own company." "Good," she said, pouring us both coffee. "People like you aren't meant to take orders from men with square ties." She stayed just long enough to share quiet company. When she left, I sat for a long moment with the smell of sugar and cinnamon hanging in the air. I took one donut and went back to work. At 5, I logged into a virtual notary service. One after another, digital stamps landed on my documents. The legal weight of each click made me smile. Every formality was a thread being cut between me and Westbridge. When the last document uploaded, I leaned back. My screen reflected a woman who looked both exhausted and awake. I realized I had never actually seen my own ambition without someone else's logo printed over it. A message popped up. "Daniel again. Congratulations, boss, LLC confirmed. Tax ID pending. You're official." "Official," I repeated out loud. The word sounded small compared to the work behind it. I closed my laptop and walked to the window. Outside, the city glowed in streaks of orange and blue. It was rush hour, but from up here it looked like movement without chaos. I thought of Elliot Vaughn sitting in his office, staring at a list of disappearing accounts. I thought of Clara rehearsing how to sound confident on client calls, how to explain trust she hadn't earned. They were probably holding meetings already, trying to patch the leaks with policies and panic. It wouldn't work. You can't fix betrayal with a memo. I poured a glass of wine and took it to the balcony. The city's hum rose up like static comfort. My phone vibrated again, this time an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Frankie McBride speaking." "Frankie, this is Robert Lang," a deep voice said. "I heard you're no longer at Westbridge." "That's true." "Good. Then I'd like to move my portfolio. I'm done with them." "That's a big step, Robert," he laughed. "Not really. You've always been the one doing the thinking anyway. Send me your paperwork tonight." "I will." "Congratulations, Frankie. You're finally free of babysitting incompetence." He hung up before I could reply. I stared at the phone. One more client. 4 total now, enough to call momentum. The sun slipped lower. I went back inside and opened the Phoenix folder again. Inside it, the locked document still glowed faintly. V Project. I hovered the cursor over it. Part of me wanted to click to watch the secret unfold. But no, not yet. That file was more than backup. It was insurance. It held lines of code and contracts I'd written long ago, a quiet creation hidden beneath Westbridge's architecture, but owned by me. It wasn't revenge. It was foresight. I closed the folder, turned off the screen, and let the room fall into darkness. The glass of wine caught the city light like a burning ember. Tomorrow would be the first full day as McBride's strategy group. I wasn't nervous. I was awake in a way I hadn't been for years. The phone buzzed again, this time with an email alert. From Elliot Vaughn at Westbridge Consulting. Subject, urgent transition discussion. The message was short. "Frankie, I think we need to talk. Things are moving faster than expected. Please call me back tonight." EV, I smiled and typed a reply. "Dear Elliot, thank you for your concern. However, as of this morning, there's no transition left to discuss. You've already completed it on my behalf." I hit send. Then I whispered to the empty apartment, "You took my desk. I took your foundation." Outside, thunder rolled across the skyline, low and patient. Rain began to fall, soft but deliberate, the kind of rain that smells like metal and change. I stood there watching it blur the city lights until my reflection disappeared in the window, not a ghost of who I was, but the beginning of something entirely new. I said quietly, "You can't erase what was never written by you." And for the first time all day, I let myself laugh, not out of victory, out of recognition. The system that had erased me had accidentally done me a favor. It cleared the screen. Now I had room to write. Morning began at 6. Not because of an alarm, my mind had already been awake, drawing lines between memory and plan. The light that crept through the blinds was soft, hesitant, like the city wasn't sure it was ready to see what came next. Coffee first, always, then the laptop. I opened my new inbox, Frankie at McBride Strategy. Com. The domain felt like an address carved into real stone. 4 new messages waited. 1 from Daniel confirming the tax registration, 2 from clients requesting meeting links, and 1 from a name I didn't recognize, Cynthia Marsh, Financial Times. I ignored the journalist for now. Attention would come eventually, but it wasn't time yet. Visibility without control is exposure. I needed control first. I set up a shared drive for the new company. Empty folders stared back: clients, research, press, Phoenix. I added a 5th, V project, locked it with a password only I would remember, and closed it again. Just seeing it there steadied me. Then I dressed for the day, not the corporate uniform anymore. Jeans, white shirt, dark blazer. I looked like someone ready to negotiate without pretending to belong in a system. At 8:30, my phone buzzed. Evelyn. Good morning, I said. Don't be polite, she answered. Tell me how much Westbridge is panicking. They'll survive, I said, but they'll bleed for a while. She laughed. Delightful. Listen, my PR contact wants to move our portfolio under your banner officially. Can I send her your new branding deck? Give me 2 hours, I said. I'll make one worth her attention. Of course you will, she said, and hung up. I stared at the blank presentation screen for a moment. Branding deck. Funny how small words can carry entire revolutions. I started with a black background and typed 1 line in white letters. Integrity is not an asset. It's architecture. That would be the first slide. Everything else would orbit around it. I built page after page. Our values, our difference, our team, though at this moment, team was just me and a lawyer working from his car. I added photos of Chicago, the skyline reflected in water, bridges, steel, and glass. The kind of images that said rebirth without screaming about it. When I finished, I sent it to Evelyn with a single message. You wanted branding. Here's identity. By 9, Daniel texted again. Press rumors circulating. Westbridge stock dropped 3%. Keep quiet, keep clean. I smiled. The city was already shifting. The next hours blurred into movement. Calls, emails, setups, the logistics of independence. It was exhausting, but the kind of exhaustion that felt pure. Every task was oxygen. By noon, I realized I hadn't eaten. I grabbed a sandwich from the cafe across the street. As I waited, I checked the news. My name wasn't there, not yet, but Westbridge wasn't looking good. An anonymous source claimed several senior clients were leaving due to ethical concerns. I bit into my sandwich and whispered, ethical concerns, that's one way to describe arrogance. Back at my desk, another email arrived from Clara. Subject, let's talk. I opened it. Frankie, I know this situation has been difficult for everyone. I just wanted to reach out personally. I've always respected your work and hope we can collaborate in the future under different terms. If you're free, I'd love to meet for coffee to clear the air. I stared at the screen, wondering if she believed her own words. Maybe she did. The young often mistake kindness for weakness. I replied, Thank you, Clara, I appreciate your gesture. Unfortunately, I have no time for nostalgia at the moment. Wishing you all the success you can handle. Send. Then I turned to the file again, Phoenix, docx. Inside it, beyond the open notes and lists, the hidden V project icon waited like a quiet heartbeat. I hovered the cursor for a moment, my finger still. Not yet. That file wasn't just memory, it was strategy. The idea that Westbridge had built half its data infrastructure on my model was no accident. Years ago, when I was still an employee, I had proposed a client management system designed around transparency and behavioral mapping. They dismissed it, said it was too idealistic. So I built a prototype on my own, registered it quietly, legally under my name. When the company realized it worked, they adopted the structure but never asked who owned the skeleton. I did, I smiled. One day, that oversight would become their undoing. But that day wasn't today. At 2, my phone rang again. It was Marcus. Frankie, he said, I just left Westbridge, officially. I'm not surprised. They tried to spin it like a transition. You should have heard the nonsense about synergy. I laughed. They always did love words that mean nothing. Anyway, I'm in, full portfolio. I'm sending the authorization forms now. Marcus, that's a big move, they'll notice. They already did, he said. They sent me a gift basket this morning. I sent it back with a note that said, you should have kept Frankie. That made me laugh out loud. You didn't. Oh, I did, with extra ribbon. Thank you, I said, sincerely. You're the only person who ever told me the truth, he said. That's worth moving for. When the call ended, I sat back, staring at the city through my window. 4 clients yesterday, 1 more today. The tide had turned. But it wasn't victory, not yet. It was just gravity shifting sides. My inbox pinged again. Daniel, FYI, they're filing for an injunction. Expect contact from their legal team within 48 hours. Don't panic. You've got this. I didn't panic. I smiled. because I knew what file they'd eventually demand to see. I knew exactly what trap they'd walk into. For now, I closed the laptop and let the hum of the city fill the silence. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth correcting its own balance. I poured myself another coffee, took a slow breath, and whispered to the empty room, "You can't delete the data that lives in memory." By late afternoon, the sky had that pale silver look Chicago gets before evening. The city lights were not on yet, but the buildings had already started to glow from within. I made a second pot of coffee, then shut my eyes for a full minute. I listened to the sound of the refrigerator motor and the soft hum of the laptop fan and my own steady breath. That was enough to reset the room. I opened the inbox again. A small flood had arrived while I was away. 3 messages from clients asking for introductory calls with my new team, which made me smile because at the moment my team was a singular person with a stubborn streak and a clean desk. A note from Daniel with a list of filings that would hit the state registry by morning. A request from Evelyn to forward the branding deck to her PR contact, who was ready to announce a partnership as soon as I gave the word. I typed a short yes and attached the file. The next email came from a law firm with a name that sounded like Stone and Winter. The tone was crisp. They were writing on behalf of Westbridge. They requested my immediate cooperation to assist with a respectful transition and to confirm that I had not retained any proprietary material. Respectful transition is a phrase that has never once meant respect. It means do the work we did not think to do for ourselves and do it for free. I forwarded the note to Daniel. His reply appeared 3 minutes later. Do not respond. We will handle. Expect a formal letter from us by end of day. He added a final sentence. Stay graceful. They are trying to make you reactive. I placed the laptop aside and walked to the window. A couple was arguing on the sidewalk below. The man spoke quickly. The woman stood still with her arms folded. Then she shook her head, and the argument dissolved into a quiet that looked like apology. I watched them walk away together and felt strangely anchored. People choose every minute. Stay, leave, forgive, try again. Business is not different at its core. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered anyway. MS McBride, a measured voice said, "This is Cynthia from the Financial Times. I understand you prefer not to comment. However, I believe this story is moving with or without you. I am calling to confirm a few facts. Is it true that several long-standing clients are migrating from Westbridge to your new practice?" I kept my voice steady. "Cynthia, I never speak for clients. I serve them. If any transitions occur, they occur because trust belongs to people, not buildings." "That is an elegant answer," she said. "Off the record, can you confirm that your exit was the result of restructuring?" "My exit was the result of a decision that clarified several other decisions," I said. "On the record, I will have a statement later this week. It will be short and it will be accurate." She paused, then said, "That is better than most half-hour calls I do these days." "Good luck, MS McBride." When she hung up, I stood there a moment longer, letting the calm inside my chest spread its edges. I did not want a media war. I wanted a clean corridor where work could move freely and without whispers. But if Westbridge pushed, I would walk down the corridor and turn on every light. The next 2 hours moved like a montage, only slower and more human. I set up calendar links, cleaned up language in the engagement letter, created a welcome packet that did not patronize anyone. I added a first principles page at the front of every document. It said 3 things. 1, clarity is kindness. 2, risk is a conversation, not a mask. 3, we do not measure performance without measuring peace of mind. Evelyn called at 4:20 to say her PR contact loved the deck. She asked for a line that would look good in a pull quote. "Try this," I said. "We do not chase headlines, we maintain them." She laughed. "That is sharp," she said. "I will send it over now. And Frankie, be ready. When this runs, you will get calls. Do not answer the ones that smell like drama." I promised I would not, then added, "Thank you for going first." She said nothing, but I heard the smile anyway. At 5, the first letter from Westbridge Legal arrived. It was long and careful and sounded like someone trying to keep water inside a colander by pressing harder. It alleged nothing outright, but it implied every possible thing. It asked whether I had retained any documents, whether I had spoken to clients, whether I would commit to a non-solicitation agreement retroactively as a gesture of goodwill. The phrase gesture of goodwill made me laugh so hard I had to put the phone down. Daniel called. His voice had that patient lawyer tone that says everything is under control. "Do not answer," he said. "We send our response in the morning. It will be simple. No non-compete exists. No non-solicitation exists. Intellectual property remains with its actual owner. They will not like it. They will escalate. Stay off email with them. We speak for you now. Thank you, I said. He asked how many clients had signed. I told him. He whistled through his teeth and said, "That sound you hear is a boardroom trying to pretend it is not on fire." After the call, I opened the Phoenix folder again. It had become a ritual now, a small act that felt like lighting a single candle in a dark room. The hidden file sat there, sleeping. V Project. The name was an old joke only I understood. V for version, V for vault, V for a certain word that meant truth in my grandmother's language. That file held a blueprint for a way of working that could not be corrupted by shortcuts. It contained annotated code, a model for communication cadence, a legal mapping between client context and advisor behavior, and a set of recorded principles that had no interest in sounding clever. I had made it because the company would not. I had registered it because I understood what happens when people prefer to borrow rather than build. Not yet, I told it. You will have your day. I returned to the living room and started to lay out tomorrow on sticky notes. Morning with Marcus to finalize transfers. Midday with Evelyn and her PR contact to script a careful sentence. Late afternoon with the Clarks for a two-person, two-room meeting that would demand both choreography and patience. Then a reminder to eat. Then a reminder to sleep. Another message arrived, this time from Clara again. She wanted to meet to clear the air, to put the past behind us, to speak woman to woman, as if gender were a rope we could both hold when the ground was moving. I wrote a reply that said I truly hope your career becomes the thing you dream it can be, and then I deleted it. Sometimes the kindest thing is a quiet inbox. Evening lowered itself over the city. The first lights blinked on in the towers, then glittered across the water like they were pleased to be reflected. I put on a sweater, set my phone to silent, and walked to the corner for a salad I would only half finish. On the way back, a kid asked me for the time. I told him. He said thanks, then asked if I worked downtown. I said I worked for myself now. He nodded like that was the correct answer to a question he had not asked out loud. Back home, another email from Daniel arrived. A draft press statement. It was short. McBride Strategy Group confirms that several long-standing professional relationships will continue under its independent advisory. The firm declines to comment on the internal decisions of any other company. Integrity remains our only strategy. I read it twice. It felt clean in my mouth. My phone buzzed with a final call for the night. It was Thomas. He never called at this hour unless it mattered. "How are you?" he asked. "Working," I said. "Good. Do not let them distract you. They will try to turn this into a soap opera. Keep it a ledger." I said I would. He cleared his throat and added, "My lawyer says you chose to decline severance. That is rare. I do not want their hush money," I said. "I want my name." There was a pause that felt like approval. He said, "You will get more than your name. Sleep well, Frankie." When the call ended, I set the phone face down and stood very still. The apartment held the kind of quiet that feels earned. I walked to the balcony and looked down at the river. A late boat moved through the water with a slow authority, lights soft on the surface. I breathed in the cool air until I felt my shoulders drop. Inside again, I powered down the laptop. The screen went black, and for a second I saw my reflection in it. Not the woman who had walked into a boardroom to be erased. Not the employee who had memorized every system login like a second language. I saw someone who had taken back authorship. Tomorrow would bring letters and meetings and probably a fresh round of rumors. There would be questions and a few accusations and a temptation to answer too much. I would not. I would answer only the question that mattered. Who owns the work? The person who did it. I turned off the lights and let the room darken around me. Out in the city, an ambulance wailed and then faded. A couple laughed on the sidewalk. Somewhere in the tower across the street, a child practiced scales on a piano, wrong notes and right notes tumbling together into something that sounded strangely like hope. I whispered to the dark room, "You cannot delete what you never understood." Then I smiled and added, "Thank you for trying." Sleep took its time coming, but when it arrived, it felt like a contract signed by both sides. I closed my eyes with tomorrow already assembling itself in clean lines. The calendar blocks were ready. The names were ready. The part of me that had been waiting for years was ready. And somewhere inside a folder with a quiet name, a secret waited with the patience of a tide. When I woke the next morning, I didn't reach for my phone. I listened first to the city outside, to the quiet inside, to the kind of stillness that usually means the world is about to move again. The rain had stopped sometime before dawn. The air through the window carried that washed metal smell that only comes after something violent but necessary. I poured coffee, checked the time 6:12, and opened my laptop. The first thing I saw was Daniel's message. Subject, their move. He'd forwarded me a PDF, a formal notice from Westbridge's attorneys. It was everything I expected, layered, intimidating, written like scripture. Cease and desist. Return all property. Disclose all client contact within 72 hours. I scrolled to the last page where it said in careful type, failure to comply will result in legal proceedings under breach of confidentiality and theft of proprietary data. I sipped my coffee, unimpressed. It was too soon for fear. At the bottom, Daniel had added one line of his own, do not worry. Their letter is smoke without fire. We'll answer with oxygen. That made me smile. I left the document open, muted my phone, and opened a new one titled Action Plan. Step 1, contain. No public statements, no anger. Silence is power when your opponent mistakes it for hesitation. Step 2, solidify. Meet every client in person. Look them in the eye. They need to see confidence, not revenge. Step 3, signal. Let Westbridge hear about my growth through their own gossip chain. Rumor travels faster than press releases. Step 4, prepare the shield. If they escalate, the V project goes live. Not as threat, but as truth. At 7, I left for the first meeting, Thomas again, this time at his office downtown. The city was half awake, streets shining from the night's rain. I liked walking through mornings like this. They make you feel like you're getting away with something. When I arrived, Thomas was on a call, waving me in with a nod. His assistant brought coffee before I even sat down. On the wall behind his desk hung a framed quote, "Discipline is the difference between plan and panic." He ended the call and smiled. "You look less tired than you should." "I'm too busy to be tired," I said. He handed me a folder, his signed transfer documents. "They'll come after you hard," he said, "but they'll underestimate your patience." "They always have." He leaned forward. "I trust you know what you're doing." "I do," I said, "but I'm not sure they do." He laughed, the low sound of someone who's already seen how this ends. When I left his office, the city had turned gold with mid-morning light. I walked slowly, enjoying the sound of my heels on wet pavement. In shop windows, reflections of strangers passed through mine. I didn't feel invisible anymore. Back at my place, I found 4 new messages, 2 new inquiries, one from a journalist I still ignored and one from Clara again. This time, she'd written, "Dad says we're open to negotiation. Please call me before this gets worse." I closed the email without replying. They weren't asking for reconciliation. They were asking for mercy. Instead, I opened a blank page and began outlining my response strategy. The truth is, I didn't need to attack Westbridge. I just had to hold up a mirror. Every corner they cut, every arrogance they called strategy, every client they treated like an invoice, all of it would surface when integrity finally got the stage it deserved. At noon, Daniel called. "They'll file preliminary papers tomorrow," he said. "The accusation is predictable. You stole client data." I expected that. I know. "That's why we're ready." He paused. "Frankie, is the V project clean?" I looked at my laptop. The folder sat on the drive like a sleeping animal. "It's cleaner than they are," I said. "Registered in my name, time-stamped, documented." "Why?" "Because if they force discovery, that file could bury them or save you, depending on timing." "Then we'll make timing the story," I said. He exhaled. "You really do enjoy this." "No," I said. "I enjoy justice disguised as paperwork." By mid-afternoon, McBride's strategy group had an office, a real one, a small suite on the 5th floor of a building near the river. Sunlight from the east, quiet hallways, glass door with space for a logo. It smelled faintly of fresh paint and possibility. The landlord asked what kind of business it was. I said, "Strategy and sanity." He laughed and handed me the keys. I placed my laptop on the empty desk and sat down. No noise, no hierarchy, no waiting for permission. Just air and choice. Then the phone rang again. Marcus. "Frankie," he said, "I heard they're spinning your exit as a compliance issue, some nonsense about internal audits." "Let them," I said. "Every time they explain me, they make me sound more interesting." He chuckled. "I'll spread that quote at the next investor dinner. You'll be a legend before the week ends." "Just make sure they spell my name right," I said. He paused. "They'll try to sue you." "I know. Are you scared?" I thought for a moment. "No. I'm the one holding the blueprint." "The what?" "Nothing," I said. "Just a metaphor." When the call ended, I stared again at the locked folder, the V project. Inside that encryption were lines of code and clauses, the invisible skeleton that held up their empire. They had copied the architecture but ignored the author. And authorship, unlike employment, doesn't expire when someone changes your access password. I took a deep breath. Then, for the first time since leaving Westbridge, I allowed myself to open it. The password box blinked. I typed 6 words, a phrase I'd never told anyone. Fire is proof that I lived. The folder opened. Inside, the files were intact: notes, patents, contracts, and the core document, V-Project License Agreement. I scrolled through the pages. Each one stamped, dated, and signed under my name, long before the company had adopted it. Every timestamp was a matchless weapon. Every clause a quiet declaration. This belongs to Frankie McBride. I leaned back, closed the file, and whispered, "You can't steal what I made to survive you." Outside, the river shimmered under the afternoon sun. The wind moved fast across the glass towers, and I swear I could almost hear the faint crack of something breaking, not in me, but around me. It was the sound of a wall giving way. Tomorrow, they'd file their lawsuit, and when they did, I would be ready. Morning broke like a clean sheet. The air felt new, not because the city had changed, but because I had. I brewed coffee in the small office kitchen that smelled like fresh paint and hope. There was no name on the glass door yet, only tape where the sign would go. I ran my fingers across the empty space and imagined the letters taking root. At 8:19, my phone vibrated. "Daniel, their filing is live," he said. "County clerk page confirms it. Civil complaint, injunctive relief, emergency hearing requested." "How bad?" I asked. "Not bad, just loud," he said. "They accuse you of taking proprietary data and interfering with existing business relationships. Same script as every messy exit in our industry. Our response is already drafted. We will file a motion to dismiss. We will also attach proof that there is no non-compete, no non-solicitation, and that your intellectual property predates their adoption." He paused, then added, "You will see headlines by noon. Breathe, then keep working." I hung up and opened my laptop. The inbox had already begun to swell. Journalists, former colleagues asking for coffee, anonymous messages that smelled like bait. I ignored everything except the clients. I wrote 3 short notes that said the same simple thing. "The work continues. Your objectives are the North Star. Call me when you want to move." At 9, Evelyn called. "You will see a story at 11, she said. "It is measured, factual, and a little poetic. You are quoted once for dignity." "I have not given a quote," I said. "You did," she said, "yesterday when you told me identity beats branding. We shaped it into a line that gives no fuel to war." I smiled into the empty office. "Thank you. Also," she said, "try not to read the comments." I spent the next hour assembling the room like a small sanctuary, 1 plant on the window ledge, 2 chairs by the small round table, a simple print on the wall, blue and white, a river turned into geometry. I placed my fountain pen and a single notebook in the center of the desk. The effect was calm and spare, like a place where decisions would not be bullied. At 10:30, the receptionist downstairs called to say a courier had arrived. He handed me a heavy envelope with a firm logo, Westbridge Attorneys. Inside was a bound copy of the complaint and a letter that managed to sound both formal and personal, as if it were written by a machine that learned to apologize. I read the first page slowly. The language was cold water. Phrases like irreparable harm, emergency relief, and unjust enrichment sat on the page like polished stones. I closed the packet, went to the window, and watched the river move. The water did not hurry. It carried time like it belonged to it. I remembered that the law is also a river. If you know the bends, you can ride it. My phone rang again. The Four Seasons confirmed my afternoon with Lucian and Adela. That meeting had a rhythm of its own. They would be in separate rooms that shared a wall. I would walk a careful path between them, making sure every word was echoed fairly. Structure would do the calming. I packed 2 copies of a 1-page plan, both identical, and an extra pen because peace often requires redundant tools. At 11:15, the first story went up. Financial Times. The headline used the word exodus. The article had a clean spine. No gossip, no smoke. It said Westbridge was facing departures following the restructuring of a senior advisor, that a new firm had formed, and that sources described the shift as trust following a person. There was a single line quote under my name: "We do not chase headlines, we maintain them." My phone vibrated nonstop for 15 minutes. I answered none of the unknown numbers. I wrote back to 3 texts from clients, each with a version of the sentence I had used all week. "The work continues. Your goals first." At noon, I met Daniel in a small conference room on the 2nd floor. He looked like rain in human form. Calm, necessary, carrying good news. He slid a thin folder across to me. "Our response," he said, "we deny the allegations. We attach your original employment contract, the clause on pre-existing relationships, the absence of any non-compete. We attach the registration certificates for your intellectual property. We keep our statement short. Judges appreciate clean sentences. He tapped the folder lightly. I also prepared an escrow letter, he said. It holds a checksum list and a sealed copy of the asset you registered 3 years ago. The letter instructs my firm to produce it only upon a formal discovery request or a court order. Not before. It is your shield, not a sword. I knew what he meant without him saying the name. V Project, I said. He nodded. We keep it quiet until the moment that demands it. If they push discovery, we produce and let their own record of usage confirm authorship. If they back off, it stays sleeping. Either way, you win by patience. I felt something inside me settle. The kind of quiet you get when you know your foundation will hold, even if the weather changes suddenly. Thank you, I said. He shrugged. This is why you hired a lawyer who reads for pleasure. We ate quick sandwiches that tasted like paper and mustard. Then I left for the Four Seasons. The lobby hummed with the sigh of money. A piano in the corner did its polite best to sound like background. I checked in with the manager, then split the meeting in 2 rooms like a magician, revealing that the halves have always been the trick. Lucian in the first room was all thin smiles and fast questions. What can you do for us that they cannot, he asked. Tell both of you the same truth, I said. He leaned back and nodded once. Adela in the second room had a stillness that made you speak clearly. I do not want theater, she said. I want decisions that hurt before they reward, if that is what the math demands. Then you want my plan, I said, and placed the single page on the table. For 2 hours I walked between the rooms, translating nothing, repeating everything. When we finished, they gave me the only signal they ever gave when they were satisfied. They both said, send the paperwork at the same minute, though they were separated by a wall. On my way out of the hotel, a man in a navy suit stopped me near the elevators. Elliot. He had the drawn look of someone who slept in his clothes. Frankie, he said, we need to talk. We are talking, I said. He looked around, lowered his voice. This is getting out of hand. The board is angry. Clara is overwhelmed. I can fix this. Come back, take a senior role, name your compensation. We can call it a reconciliation. I watched his face. The words were generous on the surface, but underneath I heard the tone of someone patching a dam with a teaspoon. No, I said. He blinked as if I had not understood the offer. You are acting out of pride, he said. I am acting out of memory, I said. You made a choice in a room with glass walls. I am living with it well. His jaw tightened. You cannot win a fight with a company that has more money than you. I smiled. I do not need your money. I have your mistakes. He stared at me like he was seeing a new shape in a familiar painting. You always had a talent for phrases, he said. I always had a talent for work, I said. The phrases are free. I left him there, a man among chandeliers, and stepped out into honest sunlight. The river looked like polished metal. The city felt aligned at the edges. Back at the office, I found a small package on my chair. No return address. Inside was a cactus in a clay pot and a card with a single sentence. A plant that knows how to survive without kindness. No signature, but I knew who sent it. Thomas understood that metaphors keep you steady. I put the cactus on the sill, turned its best side toward the light, and opened the laptop. Daniel had emailed the filed response. The clerk timestamp sat next to our motion like a small crown. He had also attached a draft of my public statement. I read it and trimmed 2 words. Then I sent it to Evelyn and asked her to hold it until I told her otherwise. I set an alarm for 9:15 that evening. Marcus liked to sign documents after the late game when his mind had cooled from the day. I wrote a cover sheet that was professional and a little funny. He had asked for that. Humor is proof of oxygen. I answered 3 more client emails, then shut everything down for a moment. The office was quiet. In the hall, a cleaner rattled a cart past the door, a mundane sound that felt like music. For a second, doubt tried to rehearse an old line in my head. What if they bury you in paperwork until you stop breathing? I let the thought run 5 steps, then I pulled it back by the collar. Paper cuts do not kill you. Shallow stress does not rewrite a contract. Judges like facts more than volume, and I have facts. I returned to the desk and prepared a small packet for Daniel. Inside, I placed a printed checksum of the core files in V Project, a notarized note confirming chain of custody, and a sealed thumb drive that mirrored the escrow. I labeled it with a date and my initials, then locked it in the drawer. This was not an act of threat. It was an act of care. You do not threaten with truth, you preserve it. Night folded itself over the city. The sign company emailed to say the door lettering would be ready by Friday. I pictured the letters settling onto the glass like birds finding a branch. McBride Strategy Group. A name, a fact, a promise. At 9:15, Marcus called on the dot. Send it, he said. I did. He signed while we talked about the game. When we finished, he said the sentence that made the day feel complete. "You sound like someone who sleeps well," he said. "I am learning how," I said. After the call, I locked up, walked to the river, and let the night wind erase the heat of the day from my skin. The water reflected 1,000 windows. Somewhere on a high floor, meetings continued, people talked over each other, someone tried to write a policy that would convince panic to calm down. I wished them wisdom. Then I wished them luck finding it. Back home, I set the sealed packet for Daniel by the door so I would not forget it in the morning. I poured a small glass of water, turned off the lights, and stood by the window until the city became soft. "You cannot outrun a lie," I said quietly to the dark, "but you can outlast it." I slept with the calm of a ledger that balances. The day the news broke, I was standing in line for coffee. The barista had just handed me a croissant when my phone started vibrating like it had a pulse of its own. Notifications stacked one after another. At first, I thought it was clients again. Then, I saw the headline. Westbridge loses $50 million in client exodus after leadership shakeup. The photo beneath it was of Elliot, leaving the building, face turned away from the camera. A line of text underneath said sources confirm key accounts have transitioned to independent advisories led by former executive Frankie McBride. For a long moment, I just stood there. The barista said, "Miss, your change." I blinked, smiled, took it. "Keep it," I said. Outside, the morning air was full of motion. People reading the same headline, talking, guessing, pointing. I didn't feel joy. I felt balance, like gravity finally remembered me. By the time I reached the office, Daniel had already called. "Don't comment to anyone," he said. "We stay quiet and let the facts breathe." I wasn't planning to talk, I said. "Good, their PR team will panic. That's not your job to fix. The only thing you respond to today is integrity." "Always," I said. I hung up, sat down, and turned on my computer. My inbox was chaos: interview requests, partnership offers, congratulatory messages from people who once avoided eye contact in elevators. The noise was flattering, but noise all the same. I opened a clean document instead and wrote at the top, "Day 22, let the silence work." At noon, Marcus called. "You're trending," he said. "They made you famous." "Unintentional marketing," I said. "Intentional karma," he corrected. "You should see Elliot's statement. He's blaming restructuring, economic shifts, market pressure, everything except the truth." "Truth doesn't need a press release," I said. He laughed. "Remind me to quote you at the next conference. Just spell my name right." When the call ended, I turned back to the screen and scrolled through my schedule. Every client who left Westbridge was officially under contract with McBride's strategy group now. The books looked solid. The growth curve pointed up, quiet and steady, exactly how I liked it. Then the next call came in. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. "Frankie," Elliot's voice said, tired and unshaven even through the line. "We need to talk." "You should speak with Daniel," I said. "I did. He's a wall. I'm calling as a person, not as a CEO." "You stopped being a person when you called it restructuring." He sighed. "You've made your point. You've built something good, but you're dragging the company down. Think of the staff, the interns, the support teams. You're destroying livelihoods." I sat still, letting the guilt attempt find air. "Elliot," I said softly, "you destroyed those livelihoods the moment you replaced merit with family names." He hesitated. "Frankie, come back, take equity, let's fix this together. The board will make it worth your while." I laughed, not loud, just enough for him to hear disbelief. "You don't want to fix it. You want to borrow my credibility one last time before the floor caves in." Silence. Then, "You're making a mistake." "Probably," I said. "But it'll be mine." I ended the call. That night, Daniel and I met at his office. He had printed the court's notice, Westbridge's injunction denied. The judge had written in plain language, "Plaintiff failed to demonstrate ownership or immediate harm." Daniel grinned. "You won't see simpler justice in 12-point font." I exhaled for what felt like the first time that day. "So it's over?" "Temporarily, they can appeal, but the balance has shifted." He leaned forward. "Frankie, you know what the next step is, right?" "Let them exhaust themselves," I said. He smiled. "Exactly, they'll overreach, they always do, then we show the truth." 2 days later, Clara emailed, "Frankie, I didn't know about the lawsuit. Dad's been well, he's not the same. I hope you're proud of what you've done." I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing. "I'm not proud of anyone's pain, Clara. I'm proud of surviving it." I hit send and closed my laptop. For the first time since everything began, I went for a long walk by the river. The skyline shimmered above the water. Somewhere in the reflection, I saw the woman I used to be, the one who walked into that 9:30 meeting, ready to prove her worth to a company that didn't deserve it. She looked back at me, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt gratitude. She had done her job. She walked into the fire so I could rise from the ashes. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a news alert. Westbridge stock down 12% in 2 weeks amid client departures. I watched the headline fade from the screen. No victory felt sweeter than silence. Back in my office, the glass door now carried my name, McBride Strategy Group. The letters caught the evening light. Simple, clean, exact. I traced a finger along the M, then on the desk, my laptop pinged an email from Daniel with a single attachment. Subject: they're making their next move. The file was a copy of a new legal motion. This time, a full-scale lawsuit claiming I had stolen the company's proprietary client management system. They'd taken the bait. I opened the file and smiled when I saw the exhibit list. The system in question, the one based on my V-Project framework. They were about to present my own registered creation as their evidence. I leaned back in the chair, heartbeat steady. The midpoint had arrived, the moment every strategist waits for when the opponent mistakes your silence for surrender. They just filed their defeat, I whispered. Outside, the sky turned orange and gold, and for a long time I watched the light shift across the office walls. The story was writing itself now. The email with their lawsuit sat open on my screen like a mirror I had been waiting to hold up. I read it once straight through, then again, slower. The language was familiar. Proprietary system. Misappropriation of trade secrets. Irreparable harm. Words stacked like bricks with no mortar between them. I set the laptop aside and let the quiet of the office press lightly on my shoulders. I brewed tea even though I still had half a coffee in a paper cup. I needed the ritual more than the caffeine. The kettle clicked, a small proof that heat could be contained and useful. I poured, carried the mug to the window, and watched the river slip by as if nothing human could hurry it. That steadiness helped. I called Daniel. He answered on the first ring like he had been holding the phone, waiting. "You saw it," he said. "I saw it," I said. He exhaled through his nose in a way I had learned meant satisfaction disguised as patience. "They are making a claim on the client system," he said. "They attached screenshots that match the skeleton you designed and registered. They think their internal adoption makes it theirs. We knew they would try," I said. "We did," he said. "This is the moment to hold still. We will respond with the registration certificates. We will file the chain of authorship. We will attach the time-stamped version control that predates their adoption. We do not shout. We place facts on the table like stones across a stream and invite the court to cross." I smiled at the window. Stones across a stream. I like that. "Do we tip our hand about the license agreement?" I asked. "Not yet," he said. "We will prepare an escrow for the full license file, and we will reference its existence in a sealed notice to the court. If the judge wants to see it, the judge will have it. If Westbridge demands it in discovery, we let their own usage confirm author rights. The more they push, the clearer your win becomes." "You sound very calm," I said. "That is my job," he said. "Yours is to meet clients and keep the work moving. Let them be noisy. We will be accurate." We set a time to meet that evening. I ended the call and returned to the desk. The documents on the screen glowed with a cold certainty. I dragged their lawsuit into a folder called Opponent Narratives and closed it. The act felt ceremonial and useful. Opponent narratives do not belong in your main directory. They belong on a shelf you open only when you have a pen in your hand. My phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. She sent a link to a new article that picked up where the morning piece had left off. The tone was clinical, almost surgical. It pointed out that Westbridge had publicly upgraded its client platform 2 years ago, and that the upgrade matched an approach I had described in a conference panel around the same time. Nothing accusatory, only a clean timeline drawn in factual lines. Journalists can be artists when they are bored with noise. I sent Evelyn a brief thank you, and then turned to the work that steadied me. I had a meeting with Thomas on a foundation project that needed careful timing with the market. I had a call with a family office that wanted a conversation about trust that was actually a conversation about grief. I had a 15-minute slot set aside for the Clarks that would become 25 because accuracy with them always took one more pass than you planned. All of that was real and immediate. The lawsuit was a prediction game that would take weeks to unfold. I would not let it borrow the hours that made my company alive. By mid-afternoon, the office door opened and Mrs. Evans peeked in with a smile. She had discovered the new address as if by scent. "I wanted to see your sign," she said. "It arrives Friday," I told her. "Then I will return Friday," she said, lifting a small paper bag. "I brought lemon cookies anyway." "You are a good omen," I said. She tilted her head. "Or I am a neighbor with a sweet tooth who needs an excuse. Either way, eat while you conquer." She left with a wave and a reminder that the hallway light flickers after 6. I ate a cookie and let the sunlight stretch across the floor. The smell of lemon anchored the room to the moment. I needed that more than I realized. At 3, Daniel sent a draft of our response. I read it as if it were music and I wanted to hear the pauses. It was clean and free of adjectives. The document did 3 things. It denied what was false. It affirmed what was true. It attached what was provable. He had included my original employment contract with the clause on pre-existing relationships. He had attached the absence of a non-compete. He had added the registration confirmation for the core component of the system they claimed as theirs. Near the end, he wrote one sentence that made me close my eyes and breathe out. The defendant is the author of the framework in dispute, and the plaintiff has benefited from its use without license. I signed the verification page. I scanned it back. I added a short note that said thank you for writing like a person who respects the court. He replied with a thumbs up and a line. Truth speaks well when we let it. The afternoon slid into early evening. The city outside changed clothes without changing its bones. I met the Clarks in separate video rooms, repeated facts in the same order, looked into 2 sets of eyes, and offered the same stillness. They signed the continuation. They wanted to move aggressively. I recommended measured steps. They agreed because they like strategy when it sounds like humility wearing armor. After the calls, I stepped out to the hallway to stretch my back. The cleaner pushed his cart slowly past, nodded solemnly like we had survived something together. The small kindness of being seen without explanation helped. I returned to the desk and opened the Phoenix folder. The locked file waited where it always waited. I did not open it. I placed my hand flat on the desk instead and let memory fill the room. I remembered the night 2 years ago when I realized the company would never build the system we needed. I remembered how I wrote the first document at my kitchen table with a notebook and a cheap pen. I remembered walking to the mailbox at midnight to send the registration forms like a gambler who believes in cards only after they leave his hand. I remembered the day someone in operations pitched a suspiciously familiar architecture in a meeting and called it a shared brain. I remembered saying nothing and taking careful notes. Silence is sometimes a seed. The phone rang again. It was a former colleague I liked. She apologized for calling and then told me in a whisper that the office felt like a hospital waiting room. People were updating resumes. Someone had seen Elliot argue with a board member in the stairwell. Clara had cried in a small conference room and then composed herself like a student who did not want to ruin the recital. I listened. I did not enjoy any of it. I felt the complicated mix of mercy and accountability settle in my chest. I told my former colleague to take a deep breath and document every promise anyone made to her this week. She thanked me and said the word legend in a way that made me want to erase it from the air. Legends are stories people tell when they are tired of the truth. I prefer the truth. I closed up for the day with 3 tasks left on the list. Deliver a sealed packet to Daniel. Prepare a short internal memo for new clients who might worry about noise. Draft a statement for later that said nothing and everything at once. I placed the sealed envelope in my bag. I wrote the memo in 8 sentences. It said, in effect, the work is not a ship in a storm. The work is the lighthouse. Then I drafted the statement. It read, McBride Strategy Group affirms its authorship where it exists and denies claims where it does not. We do not litigate in the press. We serve clients. We welcome clarity. On my way out, I stopped by the glass door and touched the tape that marked where the letters would go. I pictured the final look and felt a calm pride that did not need witnesses. In the elevator, 2 strangers discussed the Westbridge article as if it were a sports score. I stood between them in the small shared air and said nothing. The door opened on the lobby and we stepped out to the same street, each of us carrying a different version of the day. I walked to Daniel's office. He took the envelope, signed the receipt, and locked it in a drawer with the practiced grace of a man who has locked away 1,000 stories. He poured 2 short glasses of something amber and pushed one toward me. To clean papers, he said. To clean futures, I answered. We touched glasses. The sound was modest and perfect. On the way home, I cut through the park by the river. The sky had softened to violet. A runner paced past with a dog that looked like Joy on 4 legs. A child asked his mother why the water was always moving, and she said because moving is how it knows it is alive. I tucked that away. Some sentences deserve to be saved for later. Back in my apartment, I set the bag on the chair by the door and stood in the center of the room without turning on a light. The city glowed through the windows, enough to make the outlines visible. I could see the table where I had packed my box on the day they fired me. I could see the chair where I had sat when I opened the first folder that held the new company name. I could see the path between those 2 points like a line of chalk that a child had drawn and then walked without stepping off. I turned on the lamp and did one more simple thing. I opened my journal and wrote a single page titled Midpoint. I wrote 3 lines. They escalated exactly when patients asked them to. They pointed at a system I authored and called it theirs. They taught the judge where to look. I closed the journal. I set it under the lamp like an object that wanted to be warm. I poured a glass of water and stood at the window. Across the way, a woman watered a row of plants with the care of someone who believes that roots are a promise. I watched her finish, turn off the light, and leave the room to its leaves and its quiet. The phone buzzed one more time with a message from an unknown number. The text said, "You do not know me, but you gave a talk 2 years ago that changed the way I work. If they make you a villain, I will still remember the lesson." I stared at the words until my eyes warmed. I typed back, "Thank you. Keep what works. Let the rest go." Sleep arrived as if it had been waiting in the hallway for me to stop moving. As I drifted, I held one last thought in my mouth like a prayer. You cannot claim ownership of what you never bothered to understand. Then I let go and let the room darken, and the river kept moving, and somewhere in a drawer in a lawyer's office, a sealed envelope breathed like a tide. The following morning started with sunlight so clean it almost hurt to look at. I was already at my desk before 7. The air smelled faintly of lemon oil and ink. The office door still wore its masking tape outline where my name would soon be, and I liked it that way, unfinished, like everything that mattered. I opened the inbox. Daniel's overnight message waited at the top. Subject, filed at dawn. Inside was a single line, "Our response is public." The clerk stamped it at 6:14 a.m. "They cannot unring this bell." I closed the laptop, folded my hands on the desk, and let the words settle. They cannot unring this bell. Outside, a delivery truck backed up to the curb, the sound long and deliberate, beep, beep, beep. The world was making noise on my behalf. By 8, the first news alerts appeared. The coverage was factual again, restrained but sharp. One line repeated in nearly every article. Court documents confirm the disputed framework was registered by Frankie McBride 3 years prior to Westbridge's implementation. It was like watching a fault line appear on a map, inevitable and exact. The phone rang, Daniel's voice low but bright. "It's working. Their argument collapses under their own dates." "How bad for them?" I asked. "Bad enough that the board is meeting in private session." Someone leaked a memo. They're split. Vaughn wants settlement, the others want silence. "What do you want?" "I want them to keep talking until they contradict themselves on paper." He hung up before I could thank him. I stood and walked to the window. The river ran smooth and metallic below, catching the early sun like liquid silver. Somewhere behind those towers, Westbridge was unraveling spreadsheets, holding emergency calls, pretending control. I almost pitied them. Almost. At 9, the door buzzer startled me. A courier stood there holding a heavy envelope and a clipboard. He asked me to sign. The return address read, Hendricks and Klein LLP, Westbridge Outside Counsel. Inside the envelope were 50 pages of discovery requests. They wanted every communication, every draft, every record of the V project. I read through the list slowly, page after page, until I reached the final paragraph. It ended with a sentence that might have been written by fate itself. Defendant to produce all documents establishing authorship or license of the system described as V project. I smiled. They had just invited me to introduce the truth into evidence. Daniel's office smelled of old paper and calm fury. He read the packet, eyebrows lifting slightly. "They really walked into it," he said. "I didn't push," I answered. "I know, that's what makes it perfect." He drafted a short motion, no theatrics, just a promise to comply and to attach the certified license. I signed the verification, my hand steady. "When do we send it?" I asked. "Tomorrow morning," he said. "Timing is everything. Let them have one more night believing they're winning." He looked up from his notes. "Frankie, there's something else. The journalist, Cynthia Marsh, she's requesting an exclusive, says she has documents that might interest you." "What kind of documents?" She wouldn't say. "Only that they relate to a transfer inside Westbridge that happened right before you left." I nodded slowly. "Set it up." We met that evening in a quiet cafe near the bridge. Cynthia looked younger than her voice, sharp eyes, hair pinned back, a recorder on the table she didn't bother to hide. "Off the record until you say otherwise," she began. "Understood." She slid a folder across. Inside were internal emails, Westbridge correspondence dated 2 weeks before my dismissal. The subject lines made my stomach tighten. "License integration, urgent, audit trail adjustment. Need Frankie's signature for archive. I scanned one message chain. It was between Elliot and the IT head. Make sure the registry entries are updated before we finalize her exit. We need her digital signature on the implementation package so ownership looks clean. Cynthia watched my face. They tried to overwrite the registration history, she said. The metadata trail shows a modification attempt from their server. Someone stopped it mid-process. Someone, she smiled faintly. A junior engineer named Leo Hansen. He noticed the timestamp mismatch and copied everything to a private backup. He sent it to me this morning, says he's ready to testify if it goes to court. I sat back, heartbeat steady. Why tell me? Because truth deserves a witness, she said, and because he's scared, they've already suspended him. Does he want protection? He wants to work for someone honest. I looked down at the folder. The emails glowed faintly under the table light like embers refusing to die. Tell Leo, I said, that honesty has an opening. When I returned to the office that night, the building was empty. I unlocked the door and stepped into the dark room. The air carried the faint hum of electricity and new beginnings. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and pulled up the V-Project folder one more time. I added Leo's name to a new file labeled Chain of Integrity. Then I wrote a note for Daniel. Attached are corroborating materials from external source verifying attempted alteration of registry. Witness available. Use only if necessary. I saved it, encrypted it, and uploaded it to our shared legal drive. The screen reflected my face, tired but calm. Somewhere deep inside the circuits of that computer, proof had found its home. Outside, thunder rolled over the city, slow and deliberate, as if the sky itself had decided to testify. I turned off the light and stood by the window. Below, the river shimmered like a line of ink dividing what was false from what was true. I whispered to the glass, they wanted ownership. I wanted honesty. We both got what we built. The first drops of rain tapped against the pane, soft but rhythmic, like fingers signing the next chapter. Tomorrow, the courtroom would see the V-Project for the first time, and they would learn that fire, when handled with care, doesn't just destroy, it illuminates. The morning of the hearing, the city looked washed clean, blue sky, glass towers catching sunlight like they had something to prove. I arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early. Daniel was already there, sitting on a stone bench outside, 2 coffees beside him. You don't look nervous, he said. I'm not, I said. I've been preparing for this meeting since the day they called it a restructuring. He smiled, handed me a coffee. You know what I like about you, Frankie? Enlighten me. You understand that winning isn't noise, it's precision. We walked inside together. The building smelled of marble and policy, cold, official, timeless. The hearing wasn't a full trial yet, just a preliminary review for injunction evidence. But everyone knew what it really was, a public unmasking. Westbridge's team occupied the far table, 4 lawyers, 3 executives, and Elliot himself, looking smaller without his boardroom. Clara sat 2 seats behind him, eyes fixed on the table. She didn't look defiant, she looked tired. Daniel placed his files in clean rows, one stack labeled response, another labeled exhibits authorship. He whispered, when I tap your hand, say only what's necessary, no speeches. Understood, I said. The judge entered, an older woman with the posture of someone allergic to excuses. The clerk read the case title, Westbridge Consulting v. McBride Strategy Group. The room felt like a held breath. Westbridge's lead counsel started. His voice was smooth, practiced, full of adjectives. He spoke about loyalty, about betrayal, about the sanctity of intellectual property. He called me the defendant like the word itself carried shame. When he finished, the judge nodded. Mr. Leon, thank you. Mr. Heller, Daniel stood, adjusted his tie, and began quietly. Your Honor, we appreciate the plaintiff's passion for property rights. What they seem to misunderstand, however, is what ownership means. He tapped the binder in front of him. The system in question, the V-Project framework, was designed, registered, and legally copyrighted by my client 3 years before Westbridge adopted it. The evidence is unambiguous. He opened the binder. The first exhibit hit the table with a soft thud, registration certificate, time-stamped, notarized. The second, source code metadata showing creation dates. The third, an email chain between Elliot and operations discussing integrating Frankie's model into company systems. Each page landed like a heartbeat. The judge leaned forward. So the plaintiff implemented the defendant's model? Daniel smiled slightly. Yes, Your Honor, with enthusiasm but without permission. A low murmur rippled through the room. Westbridge's attorney tried to pivot. Your Honor, even if Ms. McBride originally authored this framework, she did so while employed by the company. Therefore, it falls under our intellectual property umbrella. Daniel didn't even glance at me. We anticipated that argument. He turned a page. Exhibit D, Employment Contract, Clause 12, Section B. All pre-existing intellectual property remains the author's property unless separately licensed. You'll notice the absence of such a license. The judge read silently for a moment, then she looked up. So the company adopted the defendant's work, failed to license it, and then sued her for using her own design? Silence. Even the air conditioner paused. Daniel said softly, "That is correct, Your Honor." The judge exhaled through her nose. "Continue." He gestured to me. "Your Honor, Ms. McBride will confirm authorship." I stood. The microphone was too close. I could hear my breath in it. "Your Honor," I said, "the V project was created in my apartment. I designed it after the company rejected my proposal for a client transparency model. I registered it under my name. They later integrated it into their system without license." I paused. I didn't sue, I left quietly. They brought the noise. A ripple of quiet laughter moved through the back of the room, the kind of restrained sound people make when truth arrives without drama. The judge nodded. "Thank you, Ms. McBride. You may sit." Daniel turned the next page. "We have one more piece of evidence." He handed the bailiff a small flash drive. "This file contains a digital log showing an attempted alteration of registry entries on the plaintiff's server, dated the week of Ms. McBride's termination. The action was stopped by an internal engineer, Mr. Leo Hansen, who has provided a sworn statement verifying the manipulation attempt." Elliot's head snapped toward his counsel. The lawyer whispered something, but the damage was done. The judge leaned forward again. "You're telling me the plaintiff attempted to falsify ownership records?" Daniel's tone stayed calm. "The logs will show as much. We will submit the originals under seal." The judge sat back, silent for a long moment. Then she said, "I've heard enough for today." She looked at both sides. "I will take this under advisement, but I'll note for the record, the defense's documentation is compelling." Her gavel came down with a sound that was both final and merciful. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed like rain. Daniel shielded me with the folder. "No comment," he kept saying, "no comment." We made it to the corner before he finally exhaled. "That was cleaner than I dreamed," he said. "You didn't even flinch." "I learned composure from the people who underestimated me," I said. He grinned. "Then they were excellent teachers." That evening, back in my office, I sat alone for a long time. The city was alive outside, but my mind was still in that courtroom, the sound of paper sliding, the tone of Daniel's voice, the look on Clara's face when truth landed like gravity. I opened the V Project folder one last time. Inside was everything I'd built, the blueprint of how integrity could be measured in systems, how human behavior could leave a trace as honest as numbers. I stared at the first line of the original document. Architecture built for clarity, not control. It had started as a sentence in a notebook. Now it was evidence in a federal case. I smiled. Then I did something unexpected. I copied the folder to a clean drive, encrypted it, and slid it into an envelope. On the front I wrote, "To the world when ready." Because someday the framework wouldn't just be my proof. It would be a public resource, a model for transparent systems that couldn't be corrupted by ownership greed. But not yet. Timing is everything. I placed the envelope in my safe, closed the door, and turned the lock. Then I whispered, "Not revenge, evolution." The rain started again, slow and even, tapping against the glass like applause no one else could hear. It had been 6 days since the hearing, and silence had turned into its own kind of music. No new filings, no interviews, no statements. The city had moved on, but I hadn't. My phone stayed face down, my mind somewhere between calm and calculation. Every morning I came to the office early, unlocked the door, and stood for a minute just looking at the name on the glass. McBride Strategy Group. The letters had finally been installed matte silver on clear surface, catching the morning light like something quietly proud. The first day the sign went up, Mrs. Evans left a note taped beside it. "Sometimes the universe needs new handwriting." I smiled every time I saw it. Daniel came by around noon, holding a newspaper folded in half. "They're done," he said. He dropped the paper on my desk. The headline read, "Westbridge CEO steps down amid internal review." Underneath was a photo of Elliot Vaughn leaving the building again, no tie this time, no entourage. Clara had issued the statement. It was short, professional, and distant. Daniel leaned against the doorframe. "Their board settled this morning. Confidential, of course, but I know their lawyer. You'll receive an offer to close the case by Friday. They want to end it before the next earnings call." "Do we take it?" I asked. He shrugged. "You already won. Taking their money doesn't change the verdict. It's restitution, not reward." I nodded slowly. Then we'll take it quietly. He smiled. You know, Frankie, you're terrifying in the gentlest way possible. After he left, I opened my laptop and stared at the V Project icon. It glowed back like a secret that had matured. I hadn't opened it since the hearing. But something inside me shifted curiosity mixed with obligation. I double-clicked. The interface loaded, lines of code sliding across the screen like a pulse. What I had built wasn't just a client system. It was a living algorithm, one that tracked ethical decision chains, predicting outcomes based on behavioral transparency. It could map the morality of a company the way spreadsheets map its profits. When I'd first written it, I thought it would help people work better together. Now, looking at it again, I realized it could do more than that. It could expose every system that lied about its integrity. That's when it happened, the alert. A notification blinked at the corner of the screen, something I hadn't programmed. Incoming request, external node seeking synchronization. The location ID made my stomach tight. It was Westbridge's server. I sat perfectly still, watching the seconds tick. The request came again, polite, automated, relentless. They were trying to access it, not to steal this time, but to align. The V Project had evolved during the case. The legal exhibits Daniel uploaded had merged with the master file. It was self-learning now, reading patterns, identifying links across systems that had copied its structure. And it had found its origin host. I hesitated. Then I clicked View. On the screen appeared a branching map, lines connecting financial institutions, consulting firms, tech providers. At the center was a glowing node labeled vCore. Under it, status, active across 14 networks. I whispered, "What did I build?" The answer came as data, clean, logical, undeniable. My framework had been replicated. Every company that had once worked with Westbridge had adopted parts of the system, each carrying fragments of my code. The algorithm had recognized them as offspring and was now attempting to reconcile all versions, to correct inconsistencies, to unify ethics patterns. In other words, the V Project was calling them home. I watched the map expand. The lines pulsed in and out like veins. Somewhere inside the logic, I saw my own reflection, not the woman who'd been erased, but the architect of something too big to belong to one person anymore. I whispered, "You were never just mine, were you?" That night, I met Evelyn for dinner. She looked at me over a glass of wine. "You look like someone who just discovered fire and isn't sure whether to warm her hands or burn the world." "Maybe both," I said. She smiled. "You've heard about Westbridge? Officially dissolved?" "Not yet, but soon. They're breaking up the consultancy. The investors want something new, something cleaner. They'll form smaller firms, probably based on your model." I sighed. "So the ashes are already growing seedlings." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "That's what ashes do." We sat in silence for a while, watching rain start outside the window. Then she leaned in. "Frankie, what are you going to do now?" I stared into the glass, watching the reflection of city lights ripple through the wine. "Maybe I'll teach it," I said. "Turn the framework into something open, something no one can own or weaponize again." "An open standard?" she said. "That's revolutionary." "Revolutions only look like chaos from the outside," I said. "Inside, they're structure learning to walk." When I returned home, I powered up my laptop one last time. The V Project map had expanded again, 23 active networks now. At the bottom corner, a single line blinked. "Would you like to authorize integration protocol?" I thought about Elliot, about the boardroom, about Clara's apology. I thought about all the people who had trusted systems that lied to them. And I thought about myself, the woman who had built a mirror and accidentally handed it to the world. I typed one word, authorize. The screen pulsed once, then steadied. Every node lit up simultaneously, a web of light stretching across continents like constellations redrawn by truth. The system hummed quietly, and then the message appeared, integration complete. Ethical architecture recalibrated. "Thank you, Frankie," I laughed, not because of the flattery, but because it felt alive. The machine wasn't thanking me. It was acknowledging that for the first time, data and conscience had found common language. I closed the laptop gently. Outside, the city shimmered, not as something to conquer, but something to care for. The next morning, Daniel called. "They'll announce settlement today. You're officially free." "I already was," I said. He paused. "What will you do next?" "Build something that doesn't need defending." When the call ended, I opened my window. The air was cold, sharp, honest. Across the street, a billboard for Westbridge had been replaced overnight. New ad, new slogan. It read, "Integrity, the future of business." I smiled. "Welcome to the class, gentlemen." The wind shifted, carrying the city's noise upward, trains, voices, ambition. I whispered the sentence that had followed me since the beginning, the one that now felt complete. You can't erase what was never written by you. And this time, it wasn't defiance. It was history speaking through me. The settlement announcement landed at 10 on a clear Friday. No press conference, no spin, just a filing that said we were done. A wire transfer arrived an hour later, more than generous, labeled simply as restitution. I stared at the figure on my screen and felt nothing like triumph, only release. Paper had admitted what truth already knew. At noon, my phone rang. Clara. She asked to meet where no one would recognize us. I chose a small conservatory on the river, a glass room full of ferns and light. The air smelled like green things learning their shapes. She arrived in a plain coat and sat without speaking. Up close, she looked younger than I remembered. There are faces that grow years in a month. Hers had. I said, "You asked for this meeting. Say what you need to say." She folded her hands. "I am sorry." She spoke the words with no decoration. I believed her. She continued, "I tried to be what they wanted." I let their fear move my hands. I did not order the registry change, but I did not stop it. I was a witness who pretended not to see. I thought competence would save me. I thought a last name would protect me. Both were wrong. She lifted her eyes. "I do not deserve forgiveness. I am asking for instruction." Instruction. The word surprised me. It was not flattery. It was a request for a path that did not lie. I said, "The only instruction I have is simple. When you face a choice between comfort and clarity, pick clarity until it becomes a habit." She nodded once. Then she asked, "What is V? It is not just a system. I know that now. Everyone knows that now. What is it really?" I looked through the panes of glass to where the river brightened under winter sun. "Verity," I said, "my grandmother's word for truth. I let the rest come without rush." I wrote the first notes for it the week I sat with a client who could not understand how money had been arranged to serve everyone except the actual purpose. I built it because I was tired of rooms where people spoke numbers while hiding consequence. I registered it because I knew one day someone would try to own what was meant to remain free. Clara frowned slightly. "But you own it. Your name is on everything." "Not anymore," I said. She looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" I told her the part no one knew. Months before Westbridge fired me, I placed the V Project intellectual property inside a charitable trust with an irrevocable deed. The trust has one rule. If any entity claims exclusive ownership or uses the framework to hide rather than reveal, the license converts to an open standard. The moment they sued, the countdown started. The moment we filed the evidence, the conversion became inevitable. She stared at me, understanding arriving like a slow tide. "You gave it away," she whispered. "I did not give it away," I said. "I gave it back, to the people it was built for." Her shoulders sagged, then straightened. She was quiet for a long time. "What happens now?" "The standard will publish in 90 days, I said. "Any firm can adopt it. No one can close it. A council will govern version updates. Seats are earned by documented acts of integrity, not by money or brand." She watched my face carefully. "Is there a seat for me to earn?" "There can be," I said, "if you want it the hard way. If you tell the truth on record and accept what follows. If you spend a year doing unglamorous work in the open. If you answer questions without turning them into performances." Tears did not come. That moved me more than tears. She nodded once more. "In that case, I will begin at the very bottom." We stood. The conservatory light fell on her face like a promise and a warning. I shook her hand. It felt like closing a book and shelving it next to a new one. Outside, the wind off the river had a clean bite. The city sounded like recovery. Back at the office, the cactus watched the window as if it could taste sunlight. Daniel arrived with a small box and a grin. He placed it on my desk. Inside was a brass plaque with 4 words, "Architecture for honest work." He said, "The settlement is final. The injunction is history. The witness is under protection. The open standard escrow is set. The council charter is registered. Also, your accountant says you have room to hire." I laughed. "That last sentence is the only one that scares me." He smiled. "Congratulations, founder." After he left, I opened the laptop. The V Project map pulsed with quiet life. New nodes joined, not pulled by force, but invited by alignment. The prompt asked if I wanted to initiate publication mode for the open license. I clicked yes. A message slid gently across the screen. "License conversion is live. Public documentation draft ready. Choose first stewards." Names rose in my mind and settled without effort. Evelyn for the discipline of saying no to spectacle. Thomas for the practice of grief into structure. Marcus for proof that humor and rigor can share a table. Leo for refusing to erase a trail. And one more name that surprised even me. Clara. I typed each name into the council slate with a calm I had earned. The system accepted them and assigned provisional seats. The screen thanked me with the matter-of-fact grace of good software. I drafted the public note that would announce the standard 90 days from now. It contained no victory laps, no villains, no elegy for a fallen company, just a page that said what needed to be said. Here is a way to measure what cannot be faked. Here is a map for those who intend to be believed. Use it in daylight. I saved the file and closed the lid. Evening brought the kind of quiet that sounds like arrival. I walked to the river and leaned on the rail while the water rephrased the sky. People moved around me, each carrying weather that the world would never fully know. A child laughed in a way that made strangers smile. A couple argued softly and then fell into step again. The city kept writing its long sentence. My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. It read, "I heard what you did, not the lawsuit. The other thing, the giving it away." My father built a firm that confused control with care. I am trying to learn a different language. Thank you. The signature was a single letter. See, I typed a short reply. Learn the word verity, then walk it. Back home, the apartment looked smaller, or I had grown. I poured water, not wine, and sat with the lights off while the windows held a mirrored city. The box from my last day at Westbridge was still in the closet. I took it out and opened it. The mug from that old conference. The photo from a rooftop. The old notebook with stars that meant do not forget. I placed the photo on a shelf and put the notebook back in my bag. Some tools remain current forever. My phone rang again. Thomas. We said little. Sometimes friendship is proof by silence. He asked one question before we hung up. Are you happy? I answered truthfully. I am useful. That is enough. I slept like someone who had finally put the roof on a house whose frame had been ready for years. Morning came with a clear edge. I brewed coffee and stood by the window while the first train stitched the city awake. At 9, the door buzzer sounded. When I opened it, Leo stood there holding a paper envelope and looking like a man who had not yet decided if joy was permitted. He said, I brought the originals. I also brought a resume. I smiled. I have a desk that wants someone who can keep a trail straight. He handed me the envelope. On top of the papers sat a photograph I had not expected. A whiteboard from a tiny apartment, covered in circles and arrows and one word at the center. Verity. He said, I do not think this belongs to anyone. I said, exactly. By midday, the council slate was complete. The first steward call was set for a week later. The notes said we would begin not with rules, but with stories. How did you learn to tell the truth when it was expensive? How did you practice it when no one clapped? The standard would rise from answers, not slogans. In the afternoon, Evelyn sent a mock-up of the public site for the open license. It was plain. It was beautiful. The homepage carried a sentence that made my chest ease. Integrity is architecture anyone can inspect. I stood, closed the office door behind me, and walked to the corner where our sign caught the late sun. McBride Strategy Group. Letters like stones across a stream. I touched the glass and felt its cool certainty. On the way out, I passed the conservatory and saw Clara inside with a broom. She was sweeping under the benches, meticulous and unhurried. A small sign hung from her pocket. Volunteer. She did not see me. She did not need to. The sky turned the color of good steel. The river kept its slow oath. I walked home with the feeling you get when the page lifts itself to meet the pen. In the quiet of my apartment, I opened my journal and wrote the last line. They thought a company could own a relationship. They thought a lawsuit could own a language. They thought a password could own a conscience. Then I wrote one more line, small and certain. Verity belongs to anyone who can tell it. I closed the book. I set it beside the cactus. I turned off the light. Outside, Chicago breathed like a living engine. Inside, I breathed with it. No applause, no anthem, only a city and a woman and a framework that had chosen daylight over walls. I whispered the sentence that had become a life. You cannot erase what was never written by you. And for once it felt less like a defense than a benediction.